You're back for more of the Nevers here on Buzz Chomp, and I'm reacting to episode 2. I'm Dan Salem, and there's an official slave trade going on. You heard me right. There's a slave trade run by an evil witch, our slave master, who is both playing good and bad. Spoiler alert, Miss Bidlow is not the woman she pretends to be. Many people are touched, men and women. For whatever reason, we think this affects predominantly women. That being said, I think most of the men are hiding their abilities, ignoring their abilities. They don't want to be ostracized by the community that they currently lead. This is what's happening in Parliament. They want to run the touched out of town. Swan is bringing them closer and showing them off in his sex club as an attraction. He's getting threatened because of it. The real evil witch is the one pretending to be good, Miss Bidlow, and she's running in a slave trade. So how do we know Miss Bidlow is a slave master? Because we saw her talk to Dr. Haig, the evil Dr. Haig, who was experimenting on the touched. Poor Elizabeth escaped France. She can make objects hover and move at will. She gets all the way to try to find Mrs. True's orphanage. And little does she know, she finds the same damn woman, Miss Bidlow. They're trying to figure out what makes these people special, what makes them touched. How do they get their abilities? I don't really think they're going about it the right way. Science was so basic. Surgery so basic. Yet they're continuing to cut into their brains so that they can enslave them and turn them into zombie men. I believe that the death cult, the people with the face coverings, are the same people working with evil Dr. Haig, working with evil Miss Bidlow, are the same people out to get good Miss Bidlow's orphanage. It's like she's attacking herself to protect herself. It's the perfect cover. What is evil Miss Bidlow's end game? We're not quite sure. She has an army of touched slaves, but we don't know if they still have their powers. They've been enslaved through their mind. I don't think their abilities are turned off, so perhaps she can tell them to use it, but they're such a dead zombie person that they don't know how to use it themselves, or perhaps they put something into their head to stop them from thinking freely and using it, and so then they could be removed. I have a feeling Dr. Horatio Cousins can heal them. He healed Mrs. True, who got attacked and then shot herself in a fight with Malady to save Mary, who is this super special touched. She sings a song of love, Mary does, and it reaches out to all the touched. Only the touched can hear the song. Miss Bidlow appeared to know that this song was sung. So is she in fact touched? Her brother, Augustus, is touched. He can turn himself into a crow, but then he's still there as a human. It's kind of like Game of Thrones, where he can put his mind into the animal. So I would think that perhaps he can put it into any animal. He just loves crows. Jury's out whether Miss Bidlow is a touched. Her brother is. The jury's out on whether the death cult is actually working for Miss Bidlow or not. I think so, but there's a possibility that the death cult is actually a second organization. Somehow Miss Bidlow found a giant orb of energy in the ground. It's the same blue glow that the spaceship had when it sprayed the whole city of London and apparently France as well, and people became touched. It didn't turn on until Mary sang. So Mary sings her song that only the touched can hear, a song of love and hope and peace. This energy ball got activated, which means that it has to do exactly with what turned on the touched in the first place. Malady claims to be touched by God. She saw the creation of man. She feels all of the pain of Adam and Eve, and now she has those God eyes. If you ever watch The Magicians, the God touched and the magicians have those same God eyes. It's like an evil serpent eyes that they gave Malady because she was God touched. She has God powers. I'm not exactly sure what her ability is. She says she can read into a person's soul, but I don't know what it actually does for her. Maybe she can see their true intentions. But Mrs. True can see the future. They're both kind of badass and they fight. Mrs. True shoots both of them. Neither one dies. Penance doesn't die. Mary doesn't die. Penance was at a party put on by no other than our evil witch slave master and Miss Bidlow. She's trying to showcase the touched. She wants to be the all-controlling slave master of these touched. She's running the orphanage to protect them. She's running a slave trade and cutting open their heads to discover them and have a zombie army. She's bringing them to the aristocracy so that they can be normalized, so that she can then sell them around town or control them with mind chips. Because she has the giant orb of energy, maybe she can turn it on, turn it off. She is a super devious, evil witch of a woman. I don't believe she's good at all. I think that her goodness is misguided. I think that her brother Augustus, who is touched, is going to oppose her This is going to be a brother-sister battle of the ages come to the final conclusion. We discovered a few new interesting tidbits. Frank Mundi, our detective, was married to Mary, or engaged. She left him at the altar, even better. I thought he was bad because he was kind of helping Swan find the touch for his sex parlor, but he actually wants to save Mary, and I think he's going to end up actually helping Mrs. True from the inside as like a fake evil guy, whereas Mrs. Bidlow is a fake good guy. We also met Desiree, who is a touch with powers who can just make anybody spill the truth when they get angry anxiety. This is a huge, huge, huge ace on Mrs. True's sleeve. She's going to need it if she has her hopes of taking down Miss Bidlow, because that woman doesn't speak a word of truth. But if they can get her riled up, then Desiree will spill the beans, and that's coming soon. Primrose went on full display, took all the photos, but she's just big and she's too little. She's going to be like super powerful Hulk later, but she's so young right now. And then we have Mary, who kind of like went off course in her life, has this superpower but doesn't really know how to use it or what it's for. Now she's protected in the orphanage, yet she's not. Malady's boss is Miss Bidlow. Evil Dr. Haig's boss is Miss Bidlow. Mrs. True's boss is Miss Bidlow. She's the boss of all the touched, both good and bad, and she's fighting herself. Ultimate protection for a slave master. I'm Dan Salem. Subscribe to BuzzChomp for more of the Nevers and other amazing sci-fi television all year long. And comment below, who is going to take down Mrs. Bidlow? Is she the ultimate evil, or is there a bigger nemesis yet to fight Mrs. True and Penance? Woo!